On August 15, 1971, a single decision made by one man in a televised address lasting barely 11 minutes destroyed a monetary system that had governed the world for centuries and silently stole more wealth from ordinary people than every war, famine, and natural disaster combined. Most Americans watching that Sunday evening believed President Richard Nixon was solving an economic crisis. The truth? He was unleashing the greatest wealth transfer mechanism in human history, one that has systematically drained your purchasing power by over 98% in the decades since. They told you this was temporary. They promised it would stabilize the economy. They swore your dollars would remain sound. Every single promise was a lie. What Nixon did that night severed the last restraint on government money printing, transformed your savings into a melting ice cube, and handed politicians an invisible printing press they've abused ever since. The illusion of permanence is the most dangerous financial mistake anyone can make. And in 1971, millions of Americans believed their money would always hold value because their government said so. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what was stolen from you that night, why the same theft continues accelerating today, and most importantly, the 3 specific actions you must take to stop being a victim of the greatest monetary crime in history. Step into the sweltering heat of a Washington, D.C. summer evening, August 15, 1971. Inside Camp David, the presidential retreat in Maryland's Catoctin Mountains, 15 men gather in secret, the most powerful economic minds in America. Treasury Secretary John Connally, a tall Texan with slicked-back hair and a reputation for ruthlessness, paces near the window, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Federal Reserve Chairman Arthur Burns, pipe in hand, sits rigid in his chair, his face drawn with worry. He knows what's coming will change everything. On the table between them lies a leather folder containing a 3-page memo that will end the Bretton Woods system, the monetary framework established in 1944 that pegged the dollar to gold at $35 per ounce and made the dollar the world's reserve currency. The problem is simple but catastrophic. America has printed far more dollars than it has gold to back them. France, under President Charles de Gaulle, has been exchanging dollars for physical gold, draining Fort Knox. Between 1959 and 1971, U.S. gold reserves plummeted from 509 million ounces to just 286 million ounces. Nearly half the nation's gold reserves shipped overseas because foreign governments no longer trusted American promises. The room smells of coffee and cigarette smoke. Through the window, thunder rumbles in the distance. President Nixon, facing wage and price controls that aren't working and an economy hemorrhaging gold, makes his decision. America will temporarily suspend the convertibility of dollars to gold. Temporarily. That word will haunt generations. But this pattern isn't new. It's as old as government itself. In 1933, President Franklin Roosevelt made Americans surrender their gold, paying $20.67 per ounce, then immediately revalued it to $35, a 69% theft of purchasing power overnight. In 1797, Britain suspended gold convertibility to fund wars against Napoleon, and the temporary suspension lasted 24 years, devastating the savings of an entire generation. Rome, too, debased its silver denarius from nearly pure silver under Augustus to less than 5% silver by 270 AD, each emperor promising stability while secretly diluting the coins. The psychological trap is always the same. Normalcy bias. People trust their government's money because they've used it their whole lives. The dollar worked yesterday, so surely it will work tomorrow. But August 15, 1971, wasn't about solving a crisis. It was about removing the last restraint on monetary expansion. With gold backing gone, there would be nothing stopping the printing press. Nothing except the discipline of politicians who'd just been handed unlimited power. Nixon goes on television at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. 90 million Americans are watching. He speaks calmly, reassuringly. I am directing Secretary Connolly to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold. Temporarily. The strength of a nation's currency is based on the strength of that nation's economy, he says. And the American economy is by far the strongest in the world. The vast majority of viewers believe him. Why wouldn't they? The president says their money is safe. But in London, Tokyo, and Frankfurt, central bankers and finance ministers watch with mounting horror. They understand what Americans don't. The anchor is gone. The dollar, which every global currency is pegged to, which every central bank holds as reserves, which denominates every international trade contract. That dollar is now backed by nothing but political promises. The gold window has closed, and it will never open again. The destruction was gradual, then sudden, then permanent. Take Walter Morrison, a 58-year-old mechanical engineer in Cleveland, Ohio. In August 1971, Walter had $45,000 in his savings account. His entire retirement, accumulated over 30 years of disciplined saving, enough to buy a comfortable house outright and live modestly for decades. He'd done everything right, lived below his means, avoided debt, saved diligently in government-insured banks. On August 15, 1971, Walter watched Nixon's address and felt reassured. The president said the dollar was sound. But by 1980, just 9 years later, Walter's $45,000 had the purchasing power of $16,000. His savings had lost 64% of their value through inflation, even though the nominal number in his bank statement hadn't changed. He couldn't afford the retirement he'd planned. He worked until 70, then 72, watching his life's work dissolve into statistical charts about necessary monetary expansion. Walter died in 1983, bitter and broken, his children inheriting almost nothing. Or consider Sarah Chen, a schoolteacher in San Francisco, who bought a modest home in 1970 for $28,000 with a traditional 30-year mortgage. When Nixon closed the gold window, Sarah barely noticed. She was making $8,500 a year, her mortgage payment was $185 monthly, and she could afford it comfortably. But something strange happened in the 1970s. Prices began rising, not slowly but violently. Oil quadrupled in price during the 1973 crisis. Her grocery bill doubled between 1971 and 1975. Her salary increased to $14,000 by 1976, but her expenses had tripled. Her property taxes exploded, as her home's nominal value soared from $28,000 to over $95,000 by 1980. Not because the house improved, but because the currency degraded. Sarah, ironically, became one of the winners of the new system. Her fixed mortgage payment became easier to pay with inflated dollars, while her home's nominal value skyrocketed. But she watched her teacher's pension, promised as secure retirement income, lose 70% of its purchasing power by the time she retired in 1985. The mechanism of destruction was inflation, specifically, monetary inflation created by removing all constraints on money creation. Without gold convertibility, the Federal Reserve and U.S. Treasury could expand the money supply at will. They did. From 1971 to 1980, the U.S. money supply, M2, increased from $710 billion to $1.6 trillion, more than doubling in less than a decade. The Consumer Price Index, which measures inflation, increased 112% during the 1970s. Interest rates on savings accounts couldn't keep pace. If you held cash or savings, you lost 7 to 10% of your purchasing power every year. The wealth didn't disappear, it transferred. Workers on fixed incomes lost, savers lost, retirees on pensions lost. But those holding hard assets, real estate, commodities, stocks, gold itself, watched their nominal values soar. In 1971, gold was fixed at $35 per ounce. By January 1980, it hit $850 per ounce. a 2,300% increase in less than 9 years. Those who understood the game and moved their wealth into inflation-resistant assets preserved their purchasing power. Those who trusted the government's promise that the dollar would remain sound saw their life's work evaporate. The immediate aftermath was chaos disguised as normalcy. Most Americans continued using dollars, paying bills, trusting their savings accounts. The theft was invisible, statistical, spread across millions of victims simultaneously, so no single person could point to the thief. Between 1971 and 1980, the average American family's cost of living increased 113%, while median income only increased 89%, meaning the average family became 11% poorer in real terms despite raising salaries. A gallon of gas that cost 36 cents in 1971 cost $1.19 by 1980. A loaf of bread went from 25 cents to 50 cents. A new car jumped from $3,500 to $7,200. And this was just the first decade. The cumulative destruction over 53 years has been catastrophic. The 1971 dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power by 2024. Your grandparents' $100 is worth $2 today. But the government calls this stable monetary policy because the inflation rate is only 2 to 3% per year, a rate that still cuts your money's value in half every 24 years. If you think the 1971 theft was bad, the modern acceleration will terrify you. Since 2008, the Federal Reserve has engaged in monetary expansion that makes the 1970s look restrained. In response to the financial crisis, the Fed created $3.7 trillion through quantitative easing between 2008 and 2014, electronically printing money to buy government bonds and mortgage securities. Then COVID-19 triggered an even more extreme response. Between March 2020 and March 2022, the Fed created another $4.7 trillion, and the federal government spent $5 trillion in stimulus. In just 2 years, America expanded its money supply more than the entire first 200 years of the nation's existence. The total M2 money supply went from $15 trillion in February 2020 to over $21 trillion by March 2022, a 40% increase in 24 months. The pattern Nixon began has metastasized into monetary insanity. The consequence? Your dollars are being debased at a rate that would shock even 1970s Americans. Between January 2020 and June 2024, the dollar lost approximately 22% of its purchasing power. Over 1/5 of your savings value destroyed in just 4 years. A grocery cart that cost $100 in early 2020 costs $135 today, and rent increases in major cities have been even more brutal. 30–50% jumps in just 3 years in cities like Austin, Phoenix, and Boise. But the real parallel to 1971 is the same psychological trap: normalcy bias and trust in authority. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, testifying before Congress in 2021, called inflation transitory, the exact same language Nixon used in 1971 about temporarily closing the gold window. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen assured Americans in early 2021 that inflation was not a problem. The exact quote, "I don't anticipate that inflation is going to be a problem, and if it is, we have tools to address it." Those tools: creating more money, the same poison causing the disease. By late 2022, with inflation hitting 40-year highs of 9.1%, both Powell and Yellen admitted they'd been wrong about inflation being transitory. But the damage was done. Millions of Americans who trusted official reassurances and kept their savings in cash accounts watched 20% plus of their wealth evaporate. While the S&P 500 increased 50% between 2020 and 2024, and housing prices surged 45% nationally. Once again, the wealth transferred from wage earners and savers to asset owners. The specific modern institutions repeating history are named and documented. Silicon Valley Bank collapsed in March 2023 after the Fed's interest rate increases destroyed the value of their bond holdings, bonds they'd bought with freshly printed money during COVID. First Republic Bank failed in May 2023 for similar reasons. These weren't isolated failures. They were direct consequences of the boom-bust cycle created by unconstrained money printing. When the Fed printed trillions between 2008 and 2022, asset prices inflated into bubbles. When they tried to control inflation by raising rates in 2022-2023, those bubbles began popping. And what was the solution? More monetary expansion. The Federal Reserve created the Bank Term Funding Program, BTFP, in March 2023, essentially backstopping banks with more printed money, adding another $400+ billion in emergency liquidity. The pattern from 1971 is clear. Every crisis caused by monetary expansion is solved with more monetary expansion, each cycle making the eventual reckoning more catastrophic. Your specific assets are at risk right now because the same mechanism continues accelerating. Your savings account earning 0.5% interest is losing 4 to 6% annually to real inflation, not the manipulated CPI numbers. Your 401k denominated in dollars is a claim on a currency being deliberately devalued. Your fixed income, salary, pension, Social Security benefits loses purchasing power every day as prices rise faster than wages. The cognitive bias keeping you from acting is the same one that trapped Walter Morrison in 1971. The government wouldn't destroy its own currency. The dollar has been stable my whole life. Surely this time is different. It's not different. The math is inexorable. When you increase money supply by 40% in 2 years, you devalue every existing dollar by that proportion. The only question is whether you'll recognize the theft before your wealth evaporates, or whether you'll trust the authorities telling you everything is fine, while they hold the printing press behind their backs. The survivors of every monetary collapse throughout history followed the same 3 principles, and you must implement them now before the next crisis accelerates. Move 25–40% of liquid assets into monetary metals stored outside the banking system. This is exactly what saved wealth in 1971–1980, during Weimar hyperinflation, and in every currency crisis since the Roman Empire. Why this works? Physical gold and silver cannot be printed, debased, or inflated by any government. When Nixon closed the gold window in 1971, gold was 3,500 Oz. By 1980, it hit 850 Oz. Those who held gold maintained purchasing power, while everyone else lost 64%. During Zimbabwe's hyperinflation, 2007–2009, citizens who converted to gold preserved wealth while the Zimbabwe dollar became worthless. How to implement? Immediately convert 25 to 40% of your cash savings into physical gold and silver, not paper ETFs or certificates, actual metal you can hold. Buy 1 ounce American Gold Eagles or Canadian Maple Leafs for gold, and 1 ounce silver rounds or 90% silver US coins for silver. Store it in a home safe, safety deposit box outside your primary bank, or private vault facility like Brinks. Not in a bank vault that could be seized. Calculate your specific amount. If you have $50,000 in savings, move $12,500, $20,000 into metals immediately. Example, in 2020, gold was $1,500 Oz. By 2024, it reached 2,400 Oz, a 60% gain, while your savings account lost 22% to inflation. The psychological barrier is fear of timing the market wrong. Ignore it. You're not speculating. You're preserving purchasing power across a monetary crisis that's already underway. Eliminate dollar-denominated debt while rates are low, or Use strategic debt to acquire inflation-resistant assets. This is the secret the wealthy used in every inflationary period to transfer wealth upward. Why this works? Fixed-rate debt denominated in a depreciating currency becomes cheaper to repay with inflated future dollars, while the assets purchased with that debt appreciate in nominal terms. In the 1970s, those who borrowed at 8% to buy real estate in 1972 watched inflation hit 13.5% by 1980, meaning they were essentially paid 5.5% per year to borrow money, as inflation exceeded their interest rate. Meanwhile, the properties they bought tripled in nominal value. How to implement? If you have consumer debt, credit cards, personal loans, at variable or high rates, eliminate it aggressively. That debt increases with inflation and destroys you. But if you can borrow at low fixed rates, mortgage under 4%, business loan under 6%, to purchase hard assets that appreciate with inflation, do it strategically. Buy rental real estate with 30-year fixed mortgages. Your payment stays fixed while rents and property values rise. Purchase productive farmland, timberland, or commodity-producing assets. Invest in businesses that control essential resources. Example, a $300,000 rental property bought in 2020 with 20% down, $60,000, and a $240,000 mortgage at 3% fixed would now be worth $435,000, 45% increase, generating inflation-adjusted rent increases, while your mortgage payment remains identical and inflation makes it cheaper in real terms. The psychological barrier is fear of debt. Reframe it. Strategic debt at rates below inflation is a tool the wealthy use to acquire assets while paying back loans with depreciated currency. Develop multiple income streams in skills and assets that maintain value independent of currency. This is what saved individuals in every hyperinflation the ability to generate value regardless of monetary conditions. Why this works? When currency fails, production value never does. During Weimar hyperinflation, farmers, bakers, and craftsmen who produced essential goods maintained wealth. They could trade directly and commanded real value. Professionals with internationally recognized skills, doctors, engineers, programmers, could emigrate or work for foreign currency. Those dependent on fixed salaries or pensions in local currency were destroyed. How to implement? Build at least 2 additional income streams beyond your primary job within the next 12 months. Learn high-demand skills that pay in dollars but have international value. Software development, medical skills, specialized trades. Create online businesses selling digital products or services with global reach. Invest in dividend-producing stocks or real estate that generates cash flow. Build a side business in an essential service, food production, repairs, construction. The goal is income diversification, so your survival doesn't depend on a single salary denominated in a depreciating currency. Example, a teacher earning $65,000 salary who develops a side online tutoring business, earning $1,500 month, $18,000 year, and owns 1 rental property generating $800 month net, $9,600 year, has transformed from 1 income stream to 3, totaling $92,600, with only 1 stream vulnerable to wage stagnation. The psychological barrier is, I don't have time. The truth, you don't have time not to do this. The average person works 40+ years to build retirement savings that can be destroyed by monetary policy in less than a decade. Diversifying your income sources is the only insurance against that theft. You now possess knowledge that 98% of Americans don't understand. Your dollars are not money. They're unsecured debt instruments backed by political promises. And those promises are being systematically broken exactly as they were in 1971. The difference between you and Walter Morrison is that you've been warned before it's too late. The decision Nixon made 53 years ago started a process that continues accelerating today. Every month you delay taking action, you lose more purchasing power to invisible inflation. Every dollar you leave in savings accounts earning 0.5%, while real inflation runs 4 to 6%, is a dollar you're voluntarily handing to the system designed to extract your wealth. The time to act is not when CNBC announces a crisis. By then it's too late. The time is now. While assets are still accessible, metals can still be purchased, and strategic moves can still be made. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. Subscribe now, because next week, I'm revealing the 3 historical money manipulations governments always deploy before currency collapse. The exact patterns that preceded Weimar, Zimbabwe and Rome's fall, and the alarming signs that all 3 are happening simultaneously in America right now. Don't wait until your wealth joins Walter Morrison's in the graveyard of broken government promises.